Quick question before we start. Have you ever tried to watch the road, change gears, and listen to instructions at the same time while your brain opened 17 extra tabs and started buffering? Yeah? Then you're in the right place. You're listening to the Spacious Brain podcast, where real neurodivergent humans with real jobs and real daily chaos overshare with pride. Minus the glossy, my ADHD is my superpower nonsense. Hi, I'm Noemi, a scientist, a neurodiversity coach. Yes, someone who will absolutely derail into a story from when I was 12 because I'm ADHD and tangents are my love language. If you ever felt alone or felt like the Temu version of neurodivergent because you're not an entrepreneur, not a CEO, and you forget to eat and drink on the same day, you're in the right place. Let's keep this real. Today, I'm joined by Tai, a career coach who helps neurodivergent women build careers that work with their brains. Tai discovered she was dyslexic and dyspraxic at 19 after a comment during a driving lesson prompted her to seek an assessment. The diagnosis gave her answers, extra support at university, and an identity she did not yet know how to navigate. We talk about the grief that can accompany diagnosis, the exhaustion of trying to keep up, and how dyslexia and dyspraxia can shape processing, coordination, communication, and energy in ways that people rarely recognize. Hi, Taya. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, Naomi. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I'll start with the same question that I've asked everybody, which is, who is Tai?
So, me, I am in my early 30s. I am a career coach for neurodivergent women. So, within that, my main thing is supporting women in work and also to find work and to, build a career that actually works for them rather than against them. Because as we all know, a lot of workplaces are just set up for neurotypical people. Yeah, it can be challenging if you are a neurodivergent woman in the workplace.
And you're neurodivergent yourself, right?
Yes, neurodivergent myself. I have dyslexia and dyspraxia as well.
And when were you diagnosed and how did you arrive at the realization that you were neurodivergent and you went to seek for a diagnosis?
Yeah, I got diagnosed in my late teens. So I was 19, I just started university. And yeah, basically, I was learning to drive beforehand. And the person who was teaching me basically said that they thought I was dyslexic. So I thought when I get to university, I would do a test. And then, yeah, I found out that I was dyspraxic as well, which was a shock because I didn't even know what it was. So, yeah, there was a lot of learning, I think, that took place at that point. But also, I didn't really delve that deep into the diagnoses as well. So I kind of just tried to push through as if, as if nothing had happened, basically.
And how did that make you feel? How did that go?
I think it was a struggle. It was just because I didn't really know that many people that were openly neurodivergent. So I guess I didn't really feel comfortable with those diagnoses. And also, it almost feels like a new identity, I think, as well, when you're diagnosed as neurodivergent, because, in your head, you have an idea of who you are and everything. And then that's kind of flipped upside down when you're given a diagnosis. So yeah, you almost grieve the person that you was. Yeah, so I just found that all quite difficult to kind of navigate. So I don't think it went that well. All I knew was that I got extra time at university and I was able to use a computer because I was neurodivergent. But outside of that, I didn't really know how else it kind of showed up for me.
And I found it interesting because your diagnosis of dyslexia came when you were already, let's say, grown up because you were having driving lessons.
Yeah.
How were you at school, growing up? How do you think that that was completely missed at school? Because usually dyslexia is one of the neurotypes that gets picked on quite early at
Yeah.
school.
I think because at school, especially like with English and stuff, it never really was an issue for me. So I used to
Hmm.
really enjoy reading and writing. So it was only, I think, maybe in year 9 that I thought, things are getting a bit more challenging. But I just thought that's because the curriculum was changing. You do your GCSEs from year 10. So I just thought, this is how it's meant to feel because you're getting older. Um, and the content that you're looking at is more advanced in terms of the syllabus. But yeah, that's probably when I started to have some challenges. But yeah, it just wasn't really flagged or anything like that. But I think now looking back, I definitely think like intersectionality has a part to play in it as well in terms of race. I think that comes into it
How
because
so?
I think there are some statistics to show that people from, let's just say, like a black background, they're less likely to be diagnosed, I think, with neurodivergent conditions. So I think that might have been a reason as well why it's missed. And then also just being um a female, again, I don't know the statistics, but I think boys get diagnosed much more than girls. So again, once you layer on those things, yeah, I think it's quite easy to see how it could be missed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. And how did it feel to have, you're somebody that was a complete stranger, the person that you were doing your driving lessons with, to
Yeah.
notice something that for you it was completely alien before that point?
I would say it was actually like my mum's friend, so it wasn't like a complete stranger to me, but she didn't know me that well. But I think because she was dyslexic herself and so was her son, she was able to pick up on it. Whereas for myself, I knew that like one of my cousins was dyslexic, but apart from that, I didn't know anyone else that was dyslexic. And in my head, I just thought it was to do with spelling, and I was always pretty good at spelling, so I was like, I don't think that I have it. So then, yeah, when she said about the driving, that really stuck with me because I was thinking, how is it linked to that? Um, Basically, she asked me to read a number plate backwards, and I'd done it with ease. And she said, I can't remember what she said, but she said something like, if you're dyslexic, because I guess you get like your letters mixed up and stuff. That is an easy way for you. If you're able to read it backwards very easily, that could potentially mean you're dyslexic. So, um, yeah, that's when I decided once I went to university that I would definitely get tested. And then, yeah, that's what I done.
And the dyspraxia, how did it show up for you? Because I recently did one episode with one of the guests that he is dyspraxic. And we have said that it is one of the most, like, not uncommon, but unknown neurotype. People still don't understand what it is because, like, we don't have as many influencers that talk about it, probably. So there is less awareness surrounding that. So, how did it show
Yeah.
up for you?
I think for me, it probably was linked to the driving as well. Because I remember when I was learning and it was in a manual car and I just wasn't getting it. Because I think with dyspraxia, sequencing can be affected. So by having to watch the road and then do the gears, listen to instructions. It was just way too overwhelming. So that was definitely a way that it showed up, I think, in terms of spatial awareness as well. So sometimes thinking you have more space than you actually do. Again, it's coordination, but I didn't really have an issue with that because I was always good at sport from a young age. So yeah, it didn't really affect me in terms of that. But I remember I always had issues like with sewing, tying my laces. Remember like when loom bands were really popular, I could never do them. So yeah, stuff like that, that was challenging. Like plaiting my hair, I found that challenging to kind of learn how to plait hair. So those kind of things, yeah, I would say that's definitely kind of how it's shown up. And then also in terms of processing information, which is probably a combination of the dyslexia and dyspraxia. But I think in terms of dyspraxia as well, group settings and keeping up with conversations, sometimes the conversation can just, yeah, can go by too quickly and it can just be quite overwhelming to be a part of. So I kind of prefer like one-to-one conversations or a small group, maybe like 4 people max. I think other than that, yeah, when it's a lot bigger than that, think I tend to find it quite challenging, and it can be a bit draining as well.
So, how was university then for you? Because it was straight after your diagnosis.
Mm,
And as you were saying, like you were finding this new identity. And at the same time, like we all know that university is one of those moments where you also are supposed to be social and, learn, meet new people and go
mm.
out and enjoy life at the same time as studying.
Yeah.
How was that for you, like all together? Because I imagine that it would be overwhelming, right?
Yeah, it was overwhelming. Yeah, it was overwhelming, especially like I remember during freshers weeks at the start when you're first at university and there's just so much stuff going on. So many different people inviting you out and stuff like that. So I remember I was just drained after a few days. I was like, oh my God, like there's 2 weeks of this. I don't know how I can keep up for 2 weeks because this is so intense. But yeah, I just kind of pushed through it. But I did find that I would just be like absolutely drained. And sometimes, yeah, I would have to like decline at the last minute and just say, sorry guys, I can't come because I would just feel like really, really frazzled. Yeah, from everything. I think it was just overstimulation, but not really realizing it at that time.
And how was your journey, your personal journey, right? Because that came at that time. When do you think you've arrived at the point where you finally found your identity? You finally found your space, your new rhythm.
But I think that would be after university, to be honest. That would probably be, yeah, I'd say maybe from like when I was 26, 27 onwards, I think. So a good few years like after graduating, trying things, seeing what kind of worked, what didn't work for me. Uh, And I think, yeah, understanding more like how my brain works and how to work with my brain rather than against it, which I think I was doing a lot before. Just because I guess I was trying to, keep up and stuff, but I realized it wasn't really sustainable.
Yeah. And did you do that by yourself or did you have help? Like,
Yeah, mainly by myself, but there's been times when I've like been in therapy and stuff, speaking to therapists, which I think definitely helped as well to kind of see things that I hadn't really seen before as well.
and like after graduating, what
Yeah.
trajectory did your career take?
Yeah, so after graduating, I ended up working in um like operations, in an operations role. I'd done that for a company that I had actually done an internship at in my third year of university because I had to do a placement year. They just offered me a role and I just took it. Yeah, since it was like I was familiar with them and I just thought, why not? So I done that. And they always said that I could transition into marketing because that was kind of what I wanted to go into. But basically, that never happened in the end. So I decided to leave. And yeah, one of my close friends worked in marketing. So she was able to get me a job at an agency. So I done that for a few years. Uh, yeah, and worked in a few different agencies. But then during the pandemic, kind of became very disillusioned with it all and decided that I'd like to do something else. And then, yeah, that I went back to university and then ended up in career development and being like a coach now. So, yeah, that's it, kind of full circle.
And what did attracted you first about, the operations and marketing? Because you said that that was your aspiration.
Yeah, the operations wasn't really like an aspiration. It was just a way to get in and get some money after graduating. So I just thought, why not do it? And yeah, I'd done it for around 10 months, but I was good at it, but I didn't really enjoy it. So I was always knew I wanted to move into marketing. And my degree was in sport marketing, so that's why I had an interest in marketing. And yeah, I had kind of like ambitions to kind of move into sport marketing, maybe work for like a football club or something like that. But then, yeah, then my aspirations changed. So I realized I didn't actually want to do that anymore. Like I was happy within marketing, like digital marketing, so advertising for um, businesses online, but then it didn't necessarily have to be based around sport. But yeah, as I said, in the pandemic, I just became disillusioned with it because essentially it was just making money for companies. But there's no like benefit to myself. So I just thought I would like to be doing something that's more purposeful and
Mhm.
feel that I'm actually making a difference. So yeah.
And when you have worked in those companies, because you worked there for quite some time,
Mm,
what things did you struggle with the most? And if today, like somebody will come to you or you will
mm.
come to yourself as a coach, what would you say to the you coach? What would be the struggle that you would report?
I think the struggles that I reported, it was fast paced, which I think I did, um, yeah, I did thrive in that. But I think there was a lot of competing priorities. So sometimes I would struggle to, um, like kind of to know what to focus on first. Yeah, there was lots of interaction with clients as well, which sometimes I did find draining. And then the clients can be quite demanding, especially, if things are not going well. So yeah, sometimes I could probably say communication as well, because I'd probably be like, quite direct and to the point. But then sometimes that can be considered rude. So I guess nuance around that as well in terms of communication. Yeah, that would have been like a challenge and struggle.
Do you think that you struggle with alexithymia as well, like the fact that you can't recognize either your own emotion or other people's emotion?
Yeah, potentially. I think that definitely comes into play. Yeah, as well. So I remember like discussing that with my therapist, because she might be like, "Oh, how are you feeling?" And then it would be helpful to have like a feelings wheel and look on there to kind of be able to articulate how I'm feeling, because yeah, otherwise my natural thing would just be to be like, "Oh, I'm fine," or something. But then it's like I'm clearly not, but I don't really know how to articulate the exact emotion that I'm feeling.
Put it into words or even start to
Yeah,
express where does it feel
exactly.
like that?
Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
that.
And it's funny because when I think about somebody in marketing, and I don't know if it's because my best friend works in marketing, and
Mm,
I have like a basic, very basic understanding of it, but an understanding of it. I imagine somebody that is able also to read people very quickly, because then you have to respond and propose something that would be appealing for them, right?
yeah.
So, do you think that that came into play, like with your struggles in that environment? The fact that it was very fast, and most of the time you have to think on like on the spot, you have to give an answer, and like the way that I see you, like you're more of a deep thinker rather than on the spot.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. Yeah, because sometimes the clients, they would just expect something straight away, whereas I would prefer to have to think a bit more about it and come back with a more, articulate response after doing that. So I think, yeah, definitely did find that challenging. Yeah, I did find that challenging because they want an answer like straight away, and it's like, or sometimes you can't give a black and white answer as well. They might ask, "Oh, why has maybe they're focused on the wrong metrics as well, so they might be interested in like impressions or something like that." But which is great from a visibility perspective, but essentially the main thing would be for them would be revenue. So it's kind of managing their expectations as well, and also, yeah, not trying to overpromise as well. So I think it's better to kind of under promise something and then you over deliver rather than the other way around. So I always tried to be a bit more cautious in the way that I spoke. Yeah, because otherwise they every word you say, they kind of like hang on to that. So if you're predicting that they're going to have like amazing results and that doesn't happen, they're looking to you to be like, what's gone on? You said we were going to get this. Why hasn't this happened?
Yeah. And you touched on it briefly when you said
Mm,
that during the pandemic, you became disillusioned by the whole thing and you realized you wanted to do something that was more with purpose, right?
yeah.
So, why did you go into career development, and what brought you eventually from there to coaching, and particularly to coaching neurodivergent women?
Yeah. I was looking at lots of different jobs actually. So I considered social work. I considered being like a prison officer. So lots of different things. I'm trying to think what else. There was.
Lots of very deep things as well, right?
Quite deep things. But I kind of settled on the career development because the path towards becoming like a career advisor slash coach wasn't that difficult. So it was only like a year at university, which seemed realistic. And then in that industry as well, there's lots of, it's like an aging workforce. So there's lots of people that are quite old in the professions. Yeah, I thought it could be a good industry to go into. When I was reading a bit more about it, I thought in terms of the skills that it requires, it fits in with skills that I already had. Yeah, I thought it could be something interesting to try. And then in terms of focusing on women, I didn't really see many coaches that focus on women, especially like neurodivergent women. So I did see a gap there in the market. Um, yeah. And I just thought when I was in that situation, I could have done with support. And I didn't feel like there was anyone that I could have spoken to during that time. So I thought if I could, be that advocate for women, then yeah, that would be something that I'd like to do.
And what type of support
Mm.
do you think it would have helped you when you were in your corporate days?
I think just speaking to someone and them just asking me, about my skills, what kind of things do I enjoy, what kind of things do I not enjoy, and figuring out how to work with my brain rather than against it. That would have been really beneficial because I just tried, as I said, I was figuring out, oh, maybe try this job, maybe try that job. And the whole thing maybe took me around 6 months. But maybe if I had a coach at the time, I don't think it would have taken me that long to kind of come to decisions. Would have just probably been helpful to gain clarity a lot sooner.
And moving from a corporate job where you have a very structured environment, right?
Mm,
Because regardless, you know what the hours are, there are some rules. And in a way, those rules help us, like neurodivergent minds, to kind of regulate ourselves.
yeah.
They can also tip us off, but that is another topic. That what sort of things did you have to learn when you moved from like a very structured environment to being self-employed?
I think creating that structure myself, which is something that I think it's something that I'm still navigating. But yeah, and just working with my body as well rather than against it. So I'm not really a morning person, so I don't really do any more meetings in the morning because, yeah, there's not really a point. Like I'm more energized in the afternoon. So that, for example. And then I've got select days that I have calls with clients or prospects, networking calls, which I find is helpful because then at least I know, okay, Monday to Thursday, those are days for calls. And then I've got select times that I have those calls outside of those hours. I kind of know what I'm doing. So it's creating structure within the day, which I think helps. And then doing like exercise, which I find really helps to regulate me as well. Yeah, making sure that I'm doing that. And then, yeah, also trying to get interaction with people as well. Because obviously, if you're working solo, that's one thing that you can kind of lack. So making sure that I kind of put time in for that as well, I think that has been quite beneficial.
You got to the point of the question that I wanted to ask next, which is
Mm,
when you notice then you are at your capacity, what do
yeah.
you use to regulate?
Yeah, when I'm at capacity, it's just doing small things, I think. So, always making sure that, I'm doing exercise to start the day, trying to make sure that I'm drinking my water that's on my desk, eating. It's just like the small things, but I think it's really important. Yeah. And just keeping things as light as possible. So if there's client work, making sure that's prioritized, but maybe in terms of like people that I'm speaking to, in terms of prospects, maybe keeping that a bit smaller in terms of the work that I'm doing there or networking calls, maybe refraining from doing that. So I think it's just, yeah, being a bit more intentional, just doing the main things that I need to do, and trying to not feel guilty about that as well. Because, yeah, sometimes it can be like, you get to 4 o'clock and you're like, what have I don't even know what I've done today. But, it's knowing that you've done what you can, um, dependent on how you're feeling that day. So obviously if your capacity's full, then you've done what you can for that day. Tomorrow's a new day, and you go again. Yeah, it's just trying to be, I guess, kinder to myself as well. Because I think at the start I was a bit hard on myself, and then it doesn't help because then you start to go into a cycle of negativity as well. Yeah, I'm trying to not do that anymore.
And what do you find the hardest being a coach?
It's a good question. I think sometimes it's just following advice that I would give to my clients. For yourself, it's like you don't actually follow it, which is terrible. I think that's what I find hard, because ideally I would like to be in alignment with that in terms of, the information that I share with clients. I would like to be embodying that myself. So yeah, that would be, I think, kind of the main thing for me.
And in terms of support, because, we, as you said, you support women,
Yeah.
neurodivergent women in the workplace.
Mm.
What do you think, if there were managers out there, HR professionals that are
Mm.
listening to the episode, what do you think actual support would look like for those women? And without generalizing, because we know that like we can't have a one size fits all when it comes to
Mm.
support, but what are some golden rules in your experience?
I think it's just asking the person what kind of support they would need. What do they need in place to do their best work? Because a lot of the women that I speak to, they feel like they're not being listened to. Their voice, it doesn't matter. Their manager, the way that they speak to them, it really affects their confidence. And it's not because they can't do their job. It's maybe the approach that they're doing with their work, or, maybe they're taking more time to process information. So they're comparing them against other colleagues and being like, hey, you started at the same time as Sarah. Why are you not up to speed? And it's like maybe asking that person, oh, is everything okay? And seeing what they say. Maybe they need more support. It's just asking that person, how can you help them? I think that would be really beneficial, because then people would actually, feel seen and be like, okay, my manager really, they care. They want me to do well in this work. And that would actually benefit the organization as well, which I think sometimes managers or organizations as a whole, they don't always, they don't always recognize that. And sometimes it can just seem like, lip service about neurodiversity, to say that, oh, we have neurodivergent colleagues or blah, blah, blah. They might say, oh, why didn't you ask for support sooner? But maybe that person doesn't feel psychologically safe in that environment because of how their managers treated them in the past or something like that. So I think it's just coming from a place of, empathy and leading with understanding. And I think that would lead to much better outcomes for everyone.
That's great. Thank you for sharing this. And there is another question that I've been burning to ask, and is,
Yeah.
in your opinion, what is the thing that people most misunderstand about dyslexia and dyspraxia?
I think with dyslexia, I think sometimes people think it's to do with intelligence as well. So they think if you're dyslexic, you must be like, stupid, or you have a lower intelligence or something like that, which is absolutely not true. And I think with dyspraxia, I think sometimes people have the misconception that it's something that you can grow out of. So they might think, oh, she's clumsy from a young age, or she's struggling to do this. As she gets older, those things will change. It's not necessarily that those things, maybe they will change, but the thing is it is something that's lifelong. It's not something that you can just magically grow out of. Yeah. So I think, there's definitely a lack of awareness around that, because I did a post on LinkedIn, I think maybe a week ago or so, and there were still some people that didn't know what dyspraxia was. So, there definitely needs to be a lot more awareness about it. In my post, I said like Daniel Radcliffe, who is Harry Potter, he has dyspraxia, but not a lot of people know that. And I don't think he kind of speaks about it as much. So, yeah, it just doesn't get as much awareness as obviously ADHD is very prominent in the news at the moment.
Yeah.
And also dyslexia has been something that's been known about for a while, but yeah, dyspraxia still doesn't have that awareness. So hopefully that will change, but I think it just takes people speaking about it more so that it brings about more awareness of it.
And, I like that you mentioned that the ADHD is very much in the news. And there is one thing that
Mm,
for me is very obvious. And it's one of the things that, for example, I said that we should have like a revise in the next version of the DSM-5, right? And
mm,
it's the fact that before we couldn't even conceive having two diagnoses coexisting. So we couldn't conceive having ADHD and autism at the same time. Well, now it's very obvious that when you have both, it doesn't mean that you have all the traits that are very common with ADHD or all the traits with autism at the same time. It's not 1+1.
mm.
It's something different. It's like a completely different phenotype by itself. Do you think that there is something similar when it comes to dyslexia and dyspraxia, that when it comes with a co-occurrence with another neurotype, like it changes the way it presents?
Definitely, because I think they almost like cannibalize each other, I think. So, you have like the strengths of dyslexia going against the challenges of dyspraxia and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I think that's definitely, it just brings another layer. It brings another layer into it, doesn't it? And yeah, there's some people that have, maybe three neurotypes at the same time that are all competing against each other. So it's really, really challenging. And that's why I think it's important to kind of have an understanding of all the different neurotypes so that you can kind of understand how a strength of one particular neurotype will maybe be a hindrance against one of the other ones. Yeah. So I think in general, it's just more research, isn't it? Research and awareness is definitely beneficial so that people can kind of have more understanding about themselves and why they're like how they are, basically.
And do you think that having a diagnosis has changed your life? Do you think that your life would have been different, like better or worse without it?
I think probably worse without it, because at least when you have a diagnosis it helps provide some answers as to why some things have happened in your life. Whereas I think if you don't have it, you're kind of like, what's wrong with me? Everyone else seems to be doing well, or why can't I just do this thing? Yeah. So it's definitely, I think it's beneficial to to have a diagnosis, because it gives you some answers, not all the answers. And you probably, once you have a diagnosis, you probably have more questions than answers. It's somewhere where you can start, and from there you can kind of do more. You can look into it further and kind of understand yourself a bit better. I think, at least from people that I've spoken to, they've all kind of said that thing as well.
And what are the traits that you genuinely love about yourself?
The traits that I genuinely love about myself, I think, um, that I'm a kind person, just, an empathetic person. Yeah, I want to see like people succeed and do well. So, um, yeah, I don't know if is that too? If I said, kind and empathetic.
Yes, yes. We'll go with that.
Yeah,
And is there like a trait or more than one that you're still really struggle with?
I think I'm sensitive, which is obviously a plus as well, but I think sometimes it can just be a bit draining at times, because I feel like I feel everything so strongly. So, but I love it, but at the same time it can be draining, because I feel like I feel things more intensely than other people.
And there is another question that is part of the signature questions of the episodes.
Okay.
And up until this point, only one person has responded that in a positive way. So I want to keep the score on this. And it's, how did you feel about chit chat and small talks?
I don't like. Yeah, no, thank you.
So basically 99% of the people that I had as a guest, they said, no, I can't do it. There was one person who was like, I love it. I absolutely love it. I was like, how?
Yeah, like no, absolutely not. No. So yeah, I'm glad I'm keeping the trend up to 99%.
Yes, thank you. And I have one last question for you,
Yeah, go.
which is, what do you want listeners to take away from this episode?
I think just if they, you know, if they learn something from this episode, that would be amazing. Something that they wasn't really aware of before, that they were aware of now that they've listened to the episode. That would be absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Taya. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much.
The Spacious Brain podcast will come back soon with a new episode and new stories to share. So stay tuned and follow me now, before you forget.